Welcome back to Town Hall. Can you guys believe this is our third episode? Yes, third episode. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you so much for tuning in weekly. I hope this show has been very insightful and resourceful at the same time. Guys, I was just thinking as we do this episode today, have you ever just watched the news and just wondered what's real, what's fake? What's factual, what's opinionated. I know I do. Sometimes I sit back and just wonder, is this real or not? Well, today I have my friend Crystal Berger, media mogul, here today to answer some of those questions for us. And at the same time, just give us a little bit about her personal journey. So just sit back, watch this clip, and we'll be right back.
Miss
Crystal!
Lilly. Miss
Crystal
Lilly.
Berger, I am so excited about you being here today. I am so excited. We're not going to tell all of our stories now. We're going to try to talk some serious business today, but I am excited about having you on. A lot of times I call you Miss Baltimore, and we're going to get into some stuff about Baltimore as well. But just tell the viewers hello today, Crystal.
Well, thank you first off, Miss Lilly. I'm so proud of you. I'm excited to be on Town Hall. This has been a long time coming, and I just know that your voice is so much needed in this space. So I'm just excited to join you today.
Well, thank you, thank you. And before we get into anything too serious, I just want to know, you're from Baltimore, born and raised. Everywhere you go, you rep Baltimore. We met when we were young in Houston, Texas. But the first thing that I learned about you, the first thing you talked about was Baltimore, just like I talk about my hometown. Tell me how it was growing up in Baltimore compared to what the kids go through now in Baltimore.
I think there are a lot of parallels. I'm a B more girl, born and raised West Baltimore. I grew up in a single parent family. My mom and my dad divorced when I was 8 years old. And so at that point for me, there was a huge shift in my life because I went from having, both of my parents in the house, and then my mom working 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. every single day. There were a lot of opportunities, as my brother and I would say, for error, growing up in a city like Baltimore. So we spent a lot of time on public transportation, a lot of time, kind of navigating the ways and the streets of Baltimore. And I think that a lot of those same things exist as far as like the risk of being in a tough city like Baltimore. I think that you have to have a strong family. My grandmother was very active in rearing us once my parents divorced. And so, one big thing I think is the distinction between now and then is that community involvement was critical in my success, meaning those
Mm.
hours when my mother was working 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., we spent a lot of times, meaning my brother and I, in the recreation centers. So those are like our mentors, our cousins, our next door neighbors would call my mom if we were at the house cutting up, right? And
Oh,
so
yes.
it was like, it was it took a village, and so I think the biggest piece today is that I see a lot of folks in communities like where I grew up that no longer are part of that village. It's like, I mind my business. That's my child. Don't discipline my child. For me, like a person could literally pull me up on the street and say,
Oh,
Brittany, what are you doing?
absolutely. Yes, we all experienced that. And, it was nothing for your next door neighbor to grab you up and get you together when your parents weren't around. It happened to me in my community. And you're absolutely right. We don't see that as much now. People, don't have the privilege to walk up to someone else's child and tell them to sit down or to be quiet. People get mad about that. Now, you mentioned the recreation centers that you would go to. Are any of those recreation centers still open to this day?
A lot of the centers have been defunded. That was a critical piece of us staying safe, a critical piece of us not being on the street. So even if the centers are still around, a lot of them are dilapidated. A lot of them don't have the resources or the staffing to stay open for those longer hours. We also used to get snacks and food that would hold us over until we could eat dinner at home. And so a lot of the centers have been closed. I know a lot of the POW programs came in, the police beachfront organizations came in and took over some of the centers, and then a lot of the centers unfortunately closed. And so I think that's a big difference that we see in the community, and why we see an increase in gang violence, street violence, young people just having that idle time. They say the idle mind is the devil's playground. And so you don't have young kids engaged in those spaces like we used to. And so I don't think that the children really are that much different, honestly, Meredith, or that Baltimore is that much different than what it was back then. But because there aren't activities for the kids to have, because there's a lack of parental and community engagement, you see that now these children are a little bit more out there without the restrictions and without the coverings of the community. And so, to answer your question, yes, a lot of those centers are closed, and I believe that that contributes to the things that we see happening in those communities.
Now, when I think about Baltimore, I think about athletes. Y'all have a lot of athletes to come out of Baltimore. A lot. I
Mhm.
think is Dunbar High School there. Is that one of the top
Hey,
high schools?
wait
Yes,
a minute,
Dunbar. See.
that's my alma mater, okay?
Okay, yes, that's your okay. So when I think about Baltimore, I think about athletes. Do any of those athletes come back and give back to Baltimore? Do any of them, mentor some of those kids? I know that at one point because to me, you're considered a local celebrity of Baltimore, especially when you come back. You work in New York now, but when you go back and visit Baltimore, you're considered a would you say a lot come back, or do they just leave and not come back at all? But do they come back and help out at all?
From my experience, a lot of our athletes, engage in Baltimore. I mean, Carmelo Anthony, he opened up a youth center in Baltimore. He redid a lot of the basketball courts, hosted basketball camps. Our mutual friend that we shared, Keon Carpenter, God rest his soul, he went and played for the Atlanta Falcons for 8 years, and he gave back significantly, not just doing community work with the actual children through athletics, but also giving single moms homes, all those kinds of programs. So from my experience, a lot of the athletes do come back and give back. However, we know that it takes more than that, right? It takes people within the community to sustain those organizations and those programs, to assist in growing those programs. And it takes funding. None of this can be done just at the hands of a professional athlete. I think that's a huge responsibility to give a small population of the people that are funding programs out of their pocket. So, of course, governmental funding is critical in sustaining those programs and scaling them, right? And actually being able to monitor kids as they grow and develop through those programs. So, yes, athletes come, they give back. We have a very for a point in time in Baltimore, athletics was all we had, right?
Yeah.
So you came in, and the games is what we went to. The games is what we anticipated throughout the week, and everybody was a part again, Meredith, of that community. So I've seen a lot of athletes do a lot of work, but of course it's bigger than them.
So growing up, being right near DC, right? Baltimore is
Mhm.
a train ride over to DC. Just like me growing up in Birmingham, I'm right, just very close to Atlanta. But it's two different
Mhm.
worlds. It's two
Yes.
completely different worlds. And sometimes you have people in Baltimore that never go over and see DC. Just like you have people in
Mhm.
Birmingham that has never been to Atlanta or think Atlanta is just so huge. What's the difference between DC and Baltimore, like in terms of the resources that the
Mhm.
children may get or may not get between those two places?
Well, I think that's a huge misnomer in the conversation. When I was 21, I was honored to actually teach in DC public schools. I taught ninth grade English at a high school called H.D. Woodson Senior High School, the Tower of Power. And what I was shocked to find in the nation's capital, right? I taught at a school where we were supposedly the worst out of, 16, we were number 14 on the worst school list. And I didn't have textbooks for the first 3 months of teaching ninth grade English, Meredith. So I would go and have to make photocopies of packets for my students. I had to teach from the master teacher's book to actually educate my students for the first 3 months, the critical first 3 months of their first semester in high school. And I was shocked to see that in those areas that were predominantly Black and Hispanic, there were no resources. And I was there, I lived it. And this was a long time ago, but I was in the classroom But then you could go downtown or to Georgetown, where a lot of the political leaders and their children went to school, and they had everything, meaning they had laptops to take home. We didn't even have laptops in the classroom, let alone our students being able to take laptops home. And so, of course, a lot of that has to do with the tax dollars from those particular areas where the schools would get funding based upon those things. And so, um, it was a significant shock for me to see the parallels between DC and Baltimore. Meaning, if you were poor in Baltimore, you didn't have resources, right? If you were poor in DC, you didn't. But I can say that there was a difference. In the energy in DC. And I don't know if that's because of how the proximity of where we were to the Capitol. I do believe that there was a sense of hope, a little bit
Mm.
different than in Baltimore because you have a lot of the governmental agencies. So you see a lot of professional Blacks going to work in DC, whereas in Baltimore, it may be a little bit different. And then also because of the political landscape in DC. So there was a little bit of a difference in the mindset, and I think access to what you could actually see. Whether that's traveling on the bus from South Capitol Street to East Capitol Street, you could still see the nation's capital, right? And there's a level of history and there's a level of pride and a level of engagement that comes along with that that you may not have seen in Baltimore.
Wow, wow, that's good information that a lot of people just don't know the parallels. Now, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. I want to talk about your book, Be Extraordinary. It was a
Yeah.
bestseller. I'm proud of you. I remember going through. Yeah, there you go. There you go. I remember purchasing it for a few
Yeah.
of my coworkers that really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
What does it mean to
Thank
be extraordinary? What does it mean,
you.
Crystal?
Mm. Wow. Well, thank you, Meredith, one for that. Thank you always for supporting everything that I do. Be Extraordinary was a labor of love. And it truly was me looking at my life and reading my journal that I've been keeping since I was 15 years old, and basically saying, what would have I told the 15-year-old Crystal? Or the 20-year-old Crystal, or the 25-year-old Crystal. And it's just that those tidbits of advice. But to be extraordinary, it really is to say, despite anything that's happening in your life, just knowing that when God has favored and positioned your life for greatness, you have to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And the journey of being extraordinary is not a cookie cutter path to success. You and we had a lot of shared experiences. We met in law school. I failed out of law school, right? Because that essentially wasn't where I was supposed to be, right? I did that because it felt safe, it felt predictable. But being in class with people like you who had been wanting to be an attorney since you were a little girl and you grew up in a civil rights space and you had so much purpose, in that journey. And I was kind of there for a lot of the wrong reasons, right? It just made sense. And so for me, what I realized over time is that being extraordinary, like the subtitle says, is claiming a life of purpose, passion, and prosperity. First, you have to identify your purpose, your why in life, right? And once you identify that why, you can set out on that passionate journey to achieving prosperity. And prosperity for some people may be financial, but for me, prosperity is all about having enough overflow in your life where you can be of service to someone else, and that's what being extraordinary is really about. When you're so intentional about your purpose and following that purpose in your life until you reach a place where you can actually help and be a servant leader. It's like what you do, right? It's like what I do. We know our God given purpose on this planet. And because we do know that, no matter what happens in life, we're going to be passionate about our work until we can then really help other people, sow some good seeds into them so they can achieve their own level of greatness.
Right. And I forgot to add this when we were talking about Baltimore. So I'm going to go back just a little bit. When you were young,
Mhm.
you started like a mentoring program that
Yes.
centered around HIV, I think, if I remember correctly. You were
Yes.
young. You didn't have a lot of resources then, but you got out and you did it. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And just people feel like you have to have it all to give back
Mm.
when that's simply just not
No.
true. So can you touch on that a little bit for us, Chris?
Definitely. I think that goes back to your actual God-given purpose. So for me, we started Sisters Empowerment Foundation to reduce the number of girls and women infected with HIV and AIDS. And I had lost a cousin who was very special to me. She was really critical in my growth and development. She was a seamstress. She helped a lot of kids in the community and made their prom dresses. And so with her story, she kind of suffered with some self-esteem issues, and I realized that that was the root of her contracting HIV. She wasn't a drug addict. She wasn't a bad person like the stigma that people put on people who've been infected with HIV and AIDS. And she just made bad decisions because she really didn't know her worth, and she allowed a partner to come in and infect her because she didn't know how to create those boundaries with her own self-esteem. And so when we started Steph, my former business partner and I, Tanika Rice, we really wanted to create an organization that was going to help young women just make better decisions, because we knew that those decisions that they were making were based on their self-esteem. And we did that for years, actually, with little to no resources. And like I mentioned earlier, Keon partnered with us with our organization. He had the boys organization and we had the women's organization. But what I learned, Meredith, and it kind of touches on what you said about um, feeling like you have to have it all to start. You don't have to have it all to start, but you do need to have a strong foundation. We had a very strong mission, but we didn't have the resources. So Keon would come in and he could just go to anybody and ask them for anything because he played in the NFL, right? He had built a name for himself. And I remember one day he and I were having a conversation, and he said, CB, I know you want to have more impact. I know you want to do a little bit more. He's like, well, maybe you should really look at creating a name for yourself. So then when you come back to give back, you can get all of the resources you need to
Mm.
sustain and scale this organization. And that really was one of the things that made me truly pursue my dream of being a journalist, being on television, because I really wanted to be at a point in my life where I had enough resources stored up to be able to not just sustain the organization, but to grow it and scale it so it would be around for a long time. A big piece of the demographic that we worked with, they had a lot of people that were in and out of their lives. You know, a lot of people who came and started things that didn't finish. And I realized that if I didn't have the foundation needed to grow and scale that organization, that I would be doing the same thing that other people did to them that may create a little bit more damage. So I believe that the work that we did had impact, right? It really helped to further hone in on my personal mission and vision and passion. Um, and over time, I just realized being exposed to having those resources really makes a big difference in being able to have true long-term impact.
You mentioned something, building a name for yourself. Building a name for
Mhm.
yourself. People don't realize how important it is, and how much your
Mhm.
name holds integrity. You know, when
Yeah.
you're going around, what does it mean to build a name for yourself? When people hear
Mhm.
Crystal Berger, what do they do? What do they remember about you, or why do doors open for you? What does it mean to be Crystal Berger?
I think it's those two words that come to mind. One you just mentioned, one was integrity, and the other one is truly inspiration. I've realized on my journey, and I can say I've had struggles with integrity. I mean, just being human, meaning not really knowing how to fully own that, Crystal. You are the message, like you are the impact. You are the representative of Christ, right? Here on earth. That's our work here. And if we're operating with a lack of integrity, a lack of honesty, a lack of transparency, then it's difficult to truly have real impact, right? And so I think that that's been something where even working in the media industry, there have been many of opportunities for me to
Mm.
compromise my integrity, as I know you've had in politics and in law as well, right? But as we see in our world, that stuff comes back to get you, right? God is never going to let you continue on a journey but so long without those things being exposed. And so for me, actually, integrity is a critical piece of my name, right? And if anybody who has met me in the last decade of my life, they can never say that Crystal lacks integrity, right? The other piece of that is inspiration. I did this thing called a DISC assessment, a DISC assessment, and it basically tells you about your personality. And honestly, Meredith, my innate strongest personality trait, meaning out of 10, 9 of my innate ability is to inspire people. And I remember being a little girl, I was the background singer in the talent shows with my brother, but I was the ultimate hype man, right? It inspired my brother to be amazing. I realized that even with my friends who, whether they accomplished a little or a lot, people call me for that inspiration. So when I want people to think about my name, it really means a lot to me to say that Crystal operates with integrity, but she also is someone who can inspire greatness in others. I do believe that's a unique gift of mine. I'm thankful for that, and I own that and stand by it.
Right. Well, I know firsthand. When we get on the phone, we can talk for hours and hours and hours. And the thing I love about you is you give it to me straight. You shoot it to me straight, whether I want to hear it or not. But we always leave the phone call happier than when we started. Now that's one thing I can
Absolutely.
always say when me and you get off the phone or when we see each other, we are constantly laughing, we are constantly clapping hands and just having a good time. I've never experienced a time being with you where we just didn't leave happier than we started. So be inspired is one thing that I always see behind your name on social media. Be inspired, be inspired, be inspired. How did this start? What does this mean? How do you inspire or continue to inspire or teach us? How can we be an inspiration to people? Everybody that's listening today, whether you just sit at home, a lot of people are like, we can't go anywhere. We don't have anything to do. We stuck in the house, COVID-19. How can you or us or we be an inspiration from where we are, especially during these times?
Mm. Meredith, that's an amazing question. And be inspired really starts on the inside with your purpose. People talk about purpose all the time. They don't understand the significance of purpose. Purpose doesn't always feel good. It's not always cute. It's not always convenient. But purpose is the thing that makes you fulfilled, right? It's that work that no matter how exhausted you are, no matter how stressed out you are, no matter how broke you are, you still want to do it. Like you do it innately, you do it in your sleep. And it's something that just makes your spirit just continue to move forward. And be inspired is really about it does not matter, one, what the world says about you, right? Because
Mhm.
according to the world, I should be a single mom, I should be HIV positive, I should be a drug addict, literally growing up in a city like Baltimore. I think they say 96% of the people born poor in Baltimore die poor, right? So I'm a part of that 4% because I refuse to die in poverty without a legacy. And so you can't worry about what the world says about you, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because if you're here to have impact, you have to stay inspired on your journey. Two, being inspired means that even when you're not comfortable, you still have to deliver. I tell people, be comfortable being uncomfortable. I work in the number one cable news network and the number one market in the nation, and I'm the only full-time African American woman in my newsroom. So there have been moments when that time has been isolating. It's been very self you have to be very self-motivated in those spaces because you don't have a cheerleader or you don't have someone pulling you up. But if you know your purpose, you're going to continue to be inspired on your journey. So the first thing is, you can't worry about what the world says about you. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. But be inspired means think about your legacy. Right? Think about what imprint you want to leave on the world. Think about when they're reading your obituary or they read your tombstone or they Google your name, right? Being inspired is about thinking about those things and the legacy you want to leave on the world and continuing to fulfill your God given purpose. Um, it's a level of self-awareness that helps you sleep better at night, right? It's a level of public gratification where you have people like you, like Meredith, you're a presidential appointee, you're one of the most amazing political campaign managers on the planet. And the way that you revere me and our friendship and our interaction speaks volumes to being inspired on your journey because you never know. Like I always say, when people encounter you, they should be experiencing and encountering love and light and goodness. And it doesn't matter what it looks like throughout your day. Being inspired is really saying that at the end of the day, no matter what's happening in my world or around me, it's bigger than me, right? And a couple of ways that you can do that is the first thing is to identify your purpose, One of my favorite quotes that I've coined is surround yourself with purpose on purpose in order to start living your purpose. So you have to surround yourself with a community of people that may look different from you, may come from a different background than you. They may even come from a different political affiliation than you, but surround yourself with people that are going to actually inspire you to continue on your journey. But more importantly, it really boils down to knowing yourself, right? Being true to yourself, never sacrificing the things that we talked about, like integrity, your morals, your standards, just to get a like on Instagram or to get a to get a promotion, right? So really staying true to who you are in essence, and how you were raised, and those standards that you were brought up with.
Okay, so it's no coincidence that my first show on Town Hall started off with a journalist, Roland Martin. Um, in our community, he's huge. We love us some Roland Martin. He tell it like it is. And you, my second show, another journalist, a female journalist. I've watched you on your journey. I'm so proud of you. In a world that has so much drama on the TV and so many lies, and we just don't know what to watch. How can people who watch the news every day know whether we're watching the truth or we're watching lies? How do we figure that out? How do we know facts versus opinions? Because a lot of
Mhm.
times we see now journalists, they give a lot of their opinions. So how can we, get through the mess and get through the real thing so we can make decisions for our everyday life?
I love, love, love this question, Meredith, because when I go out and speak, I always tell people, as a journalist, as someone who works for a news corporation, it's a business, right? It's a business. And so our job is just to inform you, right? And I always tell people, you can't get educated from a 30-second soundbite or 1.5-minute interview, right? So the burden does rest on the consumer, meaning after we inform you, take the time to educate yourself, right? Meaning go to Google, go to the place called the library and get the card catalog, right? Dig deep for the facts, right? Books are the most powerful thing in the world. It's funny, I interviewed a New York Times bestseller once. He said to me, Crystal, he said, think about why it was illegal for slaves to read. It was about keeping the people oppressed, keeping them ignorant to the truth, right? And what we have to understand is it's just like as believers, I openly say that I'm a Christian, right? I could read one scripture, in Proverbs and make that my mantra, but there's an entire book that goes along with that scripture in Proverbs. So it's my job, right? If I want to be educated about how I'm supposed to navigate based upon my belief system, to read the book, right? To study the book, right? Study to show yourself approved. And so I tell people the only way to dispel the facts from the opinions is that you actually take the time to educate yourself and form your own opinion. It's very dangerous, especially where we're going in this political landscape and coming up on an election, to not take that due diligence and do the work. And we are blessed that we have the internet, right? You have to dig and you have to research credible sources for information. And then you take the next step if you want to do better, right? You can only do better when you know better. And I believe that every single platform that exists, one, yes, there is a mission and a vision, but there's also a business model on how they can make more money. And so anytime that you have a system that's in place that's created to create a profit, you're going to see some slant, whichever way you go. And so you have to make a commitment to yourself and as an informed citizen to do the work and do the homework on your
So let me ask you, since you working
own.
every day, all day in media, are we talking about the same stuff all day, every day now? Because I hate turning on the news because all I
Yeah.
hear now is fear, COVID 19 election, COVID 19 election. What are some other topics that people are talking about, or is it everything is focused in right now on COVID 19 and the upcoming election?
Well, I mean, I think that's a big piece of ratings, right? And what our executives believe. people want to hear, right? You do have some other platforms that are engaging in some inspiring content and some other information. Every platform, though, I always tell people, one of my favorites is the Associated Press, right? That's where we get a lot of our facts from. And I tell people, if you want to get more fact-based information, then go to the AP. They have a free application you can download on your phone. I'm not getting paid for this endorsement. But and you can find all kinds of information there just from a straight factual, clear standpoint. But we do create other content. For example, I mean, I have a news feature that airs on Sirius XM channel 115, and it's an inspirational feature. It comes on every single weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, and I share inspiring stories of ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. Now, does that get the same level of of funding and push? Not necessarily, because based upon the numbers, Meredith, they look at how many clicks do these things get, right? How much engagement is there? And from a business standpoint, networks will continue to put out what people are engaging in, because that's what the audience, it's like a supply and demand kind of thing. But to answer your question, yes, there is a lot of hopeful content out there, fun content that still exists, but you have to seek it out, right? You have to seek it out, because when we're talking about what is trending in the news and what's coming in the news, it is COVID-19. A lot of the news organizations are committed to just keeping people as informed as possible about the numbers and how to stay safe and what's next. And then, of course, we know with politics, that's the next big thing that's coming up, is the presidential election. So to answer your question, there is good content out there, but it is a big issue of supply and demand, like any other economic system that exists. And if people are just tuning in for the numbers, or if they're just looking to see who, what the campaigns are talking about, then that's what the organizations are pushing. But there are a lot of great, like, I love this one platform called Humans of New York. I love these stories because they're so inspiring. I love the Undefeated. It's stories of sports, stories of success. But I seek those things out. Even as someone who works in news, I have to diligently look for hope-filled content. You and I talk about shows that we enjoy and things that we like to watch, but we actually do the work to do that. So, it's a catch-22. I wish that more people would like the hopeful and inspiring content a little bit more, because then that would increase the demand and you would get more of it.
Right. I'm telling people now during this time, we're in the middle of so many pandemics, right? Police
Mhm.
brutality, racism, COVID
Mhm.
19. Tell me, have you experienced in this world of journalism racism? And how do you overcome that, or how did you overcome that? And I know, living in New York, a lot of people think racism just exists. It's a Southern thing, which we all know that is
Mhm.
not true. People think it's just a
Mhm.
Southern thing. Oh, you in Birmingham, y'all experience it all the time.
Mhm.
But being in New York, working in this field, how did you overcome? Well, first, did you experience? Have you ever experienced racism? And I'm asking questions that I already know the answer to. So, but the viewers don't. And how did you
Mhm.
overcome this, or how are you even mentally dealing with this?
Mhm. So that's a loaded question, Meredith. That's a loaded question. But absolutely, I've absolutely experienced racism in every area of my life, right? Not just career wise, personally, anything down to, you and I, we like nice things. So, down to me being in a high end department store and someone assuming that the man that I'm with, just because he can afford to buy me a nice pair of shoes, that he's a basketball player, right? That's an unconscious bias that's rooted in racism, right? Or I've had conversations in my newsroom with a lot of my colleagues who I love and adore, and they love me the same. And I asked them, do you think that I'm the only qualified African American woman to be in this newsroom? And if you think that there are universities full of women just like me that graduate with master's degrees, PhDs, LLMs, any degree that you can name, what makes you think that? Have you ever questioned why they're not in the room? Right?
Mm.
And I'm like, that's because of racism. It might not be overt racism, but systemic racism that create barriers to entry within certain corporate environments exists. But what has helped me on the journey, one is I was raised by some old school saints, okay? And my old school saints, my auntie, my grandmother's sister used to always tell me, Crystal, your ice has to be colder. And I never really understood what that meant until I grew and developed and became an adult woman, meaning that I had to be better than my counterparts who may be equally and or less educated, equally and or less attractive, equally and or less articulate. I just had to be better. And I think that goes back to being extraordinary, right? One thing that has and one thing that has really helped me on the journey of combating racism in my own life is that I've always made a commitment to excellence, just as you have, Meredith. We talk about the spirit of excellence often, right? And is it unfortunate that we have to be excellent when our counterparts can be mediocre? Absolutely, it's unfortunate, but that is a reality of being in America. And so, being excellent has helped me combat racism to where people kind of see more of my excellence versus the color of my skin, right? So that has opened doors for me as well. But the other piece of that has just really been a strong faith of when I want to quit because of racism and realizing that racism is not bigger than my calling or my purpose. So I continue to press on. And so, it has been moments where I've cried. I remember when I first moved to New York and I was shocked to see how, though we were in a melting pot, right? We're in the most diverse place in the world, but to walk into corporations and finance and media, in any major industry in the world and see almost little to no faces of color in executive leadership positions or in mid-management positions. It was a shock to me. I came from the educational background and I came from an environment like Baltimore and DC. Like I mentioned, you had a lot of professionals that worked in government. And so I saw Black people, brown people in positions of leadership, maybe not in positions of power, but at least in leadership positions. And it was a shock to my system to see that. But I realized that being excellent and being faith filled and just being purpose driven have been the benefits for me, or the thing that has helped me overcome racism. But I also like to encourage people to try to not focus on racism in these spaces, meaning remember that your skin color is your unique benefit, right? Because I was the only Black girl in the newsroom when the Black superstars came into the newsroom, I was given the opportunity to interview them. Some of the biggest names in entertainment, sports, social activism. And so I always have viewed my color as my gift, as my uniqueness and the thing to set me apart from others. And so I think it's about really reshaping your perspective as well as it pertains to racism, not being ignorant about it, not being idealistic about it, but knowing that because of, the culture and the climate of where we are, and this is pre, George Floyd, right? This is, since I was a young woman, I don't know if you remember this, Meredith. I don't know if you remember, you and I were in the Levi store in Houston, and I was looking for a pair of Levi's, and this older white gentleman came in, and he was really friendly to us, and he asked us, "What do you gals do?" And we told him we're in law school, and he almost looked like he saw a
Yeah.
ghost. It was like he saw a ghost. And I will never, I could still see him physically. He was very pleasant, but you could see that there was something about the fact that two young Black women, that were in the same store shopping where he was, were actually in law school that kind of made him feel some kind of way. And, so even if it's the little things, racism does exist, but we cannot allow that spirit of racism to keep us from walking in our victory, walking in the blessing. We just have to be actively engaged in the process to try to impact this kind of legislation that's going to further move the equality and equity conversation further. But also, we got to continue to be great and know that being Black and brown is what makes us great.
Right, absolutely. And when you talked about interviewing, I've seen hundreds of your interviews in the newsrooms, hundreds, and I could tell you probably my top two faves. But what are your top two faves? What are some of those interviews that you'll never forget? The one or two
Mm,
two people that you interviewed that you like, this changed my life. This helped
mm,
me so much, and you just enjoyed sitting down with them and having a good conversation with them. And to be honest, with this show, Town Hall, I look back at your interviews to help me with my interviews. So hopefully, I'm learning a lot, and you'll be proud of me, you and Roland Martin. But I mean, I am new to this. I'm new to
Yeah.
this, and but watching your interviews have helped me a lot. With this show, Town Hall, just being real. But you've had some great people on. You've been blessed to interview some of the top notch people in the world. Give me two people that stick out and why.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, Meredith, you're doing a great job. Let me just tell you that, right? Let me just tell you that, and I'm honored that you actually see me as someone to help you in that way. So I'm thankful for that. Because anyway, but to answer your question, um, two of the top ones, I would say one of the most compelling for me was I interviewed Polly Shepard, and she was one of the survivors of the shooting with Dylan Roof at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And one, to have survived that, just talking to her, it just really touched my heart, right? Because I felt like it was one of my aunties. I grew up AME, she's talking about going to Bible study that night and just sharing her story with me of how she forgave him, almost immediately, and seeing God's love in her heart to do that. I had never met anyone with that level of like compassion, to just see that there was something in that experience that she knew was creating a bigger calling on her life, and how she could be an advocate for people, and how she really turned that tragedy into something that was going to really help a lot of people. So that was an amazing interview for me. I think one of my funnest interviews, okay, was with Trey Songz. Okay, I can say Trey Songz. And when they say Mr. Steal Your Girl, honey, he truly is, he has this energy that is like so smooth and so like, even though you're uncomfortable because he that smooth, like you get comfortable real quick, like, okay, Trey, right? So he was really fun. I really enjoyed talking to him. He had, again, it's like that light about him, he was really, really fun. We had a great vibe. And I think another one of my favorite interviews was with Ennis Cantor. He actually was center for the Boston Celtics, and he's a human rights activist. And hearing his story, one of how he came to America not knowing how to speak English, but to play basketball, and how he learned speaking English from watching SpongeBob and the Jersey Shore, and to really go on to be one of the top NBA players in the league, and then to be facing political persecution from his country's president, who took his visa and some other things. His story was phenomenal because he continued to press on for human rights for people in his country, despite what he was facing on the home front with his own home, right? Like he couldn't go home. And so I think those were a few, three of my favorite ones. But I can say this, Meredith, and it's just like with you, you're going to have this experience with your show. I believe when you're committed to the message, right? I've never had a bad interview. Like, I may have met some people when they first walked in, they may act a little stank, right? Whatever the word is. Um, but by the end of the conversation, walking in my purpose and my gift, the stankness was removed, right? The stankness was removed. And so I'll say that every interview has been great. At the end of every conversation, I love to leave people inspired. And if I can do that through some amazing people, I'm just thankful, right? I'm thankful for God's favor to be able to position me in a place where I can literally interview some of the most amazing people in the world. And a lot of times things might not look like in the beginning what they ultimately end up being for your life. Going where I went as a journalist, people like, you going where? You doing what? Why don't but being in that space, one allowed me to, because of some of the barriers that I faced and being excellent, I had to learn how to do everything. I
Yeah.
was blessed with some great mentors that invested in me. Go ahead.
Yes. Wait a minute. being that she's right. She had to learn how to do everything. I just want to jump in and say, do you remember the time we were on the red carpet in Atlanta? Was it a Deion Sanders event? And you had me
Yeah.
holding the camera with my dress on. I'm holding the camera, holding the light. She's interviewing people. I'm like, wait a minute. And so tell people about that, Crystal. A lot of people think that you walking around with your whole crew the entire
Mm,
time. But a lot of times
mm,
you have to get in and get your hands dirty and do
yeah.
everything. Can you talk
Mm.
about that? I'm glad you brought that up.
It's like you said in your interview, Meredith, when you were interviewed for the Hope TV, the process perfects the purpose. Like,
Yes.
because I haven't been given teams of people to go out with me, I've had to learn how to do everything. But come full circle, I can literally create a whole set in my living room. I can do my hair, makeup, eyelashes, wardrobe, know how to write my script, know how to produce it, know how to deliver it, and then know how to post it to social media because of the small beginnings. Sometimes we're so focused on the destination that we forget that the
Mm.
journey is making us great. Right? It is our journey, your journey in politics, and now your journey that you're starting in journalism, right? It is going to perfect the ultimate purpose in your life. And so we have to really embrace those moments that this is just the testing ground. This is just the opportunity for me to just become all things, right? To now where I can say I can go to a network and literally negotiate an executive producer role, right? Because I know how to do everything, right? I know how to do everything.
Yes.
And so now I just need the funding and the team to make it happen at a grander scale. But those small steps that you take along the way are just perfecting the greatness that you are going to deliver at the end when you get to that destination. So, I mean, those times have been crazy, right? And I may look and see somebody with a team, and I might have that immediate moment of, you know, of I can't even say of disappointment, but in that moment, you may feel like, well, I should have a team. I deserve a team. I've earned a team. But it's only something that has made me better. So I, I can say it this season. I'm grateful for those moments, Meredith, even though sometimes in the moment, those were some very challenging times.
Yes, and so it's funny because I have to give your brother James Berger a shout out, but I call you this too because he always calls you Lil Oprah, and I started calling you Lil Oprah, and I guess my question comes: who is your mentor, whether they know you or not? Who is your mentor? Who do you kind of get your style from? I really always wanted to know that. We call you Little Oprah, but is Oprah your mentor? If it's somebody that you want to be, have be alike in this whole journalism thing, who is it? Who is that person?
Hmm. Wow, that's a great question. It really is because I can say that because a lot of the learning I had to do on my own, right? I would pull pieces from different people. One show that I used to love, I used to watch Barbara Walters when she used to do her specials, right? And Barbara Walters just had this way of going in with the question, and even if it was a tough question, it was something about her delivery that was so effective that you felt like you better answer Barbara Walters. You better answer that question. And so it was a lot about her style and her interviewing techniques that I love. And I love long form interviews, more enterprising conversations like the story behind the story. So she's one. Oprah, one thing I love about Oprah is she did two things that I loved in her journey. One, actually being able to look at her and see, another brown woman who was clearly an African American woman, do what she did. That was just inspiring within itself, right? But what I loved about Oprah was her compassion, right? Her compassion on the inside came through her interviews, right? And I always wanted to convey that level of I'm not doing this because I want to be a star. I'm doing this because I want to change lives. And so that piece of Oprah's unique gifting is something that I pull from. And I think as far as real life mentors, I've had a lot of people that are so into me. A lot of people who were seasonal. because a lot of times we think that mentors are supposed to stay with us forever. But as you know,
Mm.
if we're not, if we're not growing and evolving, then that means that the vision and the purpose is dying, right? And so what I realized over time was that there would be certain people that would plant different seeds in my life over time. So a gentleman named Rick Folbaum, he's in Miami now. He's one of the lead anchors down there. Rick literally was someone who took me under my wing. Took me under his wing. He would sit with me when he was at Fox. He would teach me about how to read and write certain things. One of my senior managing editors, Hank Weinblum, he really helped me hone in on my writing as a journalist. Like, Crystal, this is how you write for news. So he was a critical mentor for me, even though he didn't know it, because he was one of my managers. Also, Arthel Neville, she sowed a major seed into me when I first got into my career on when I was creating my tape, when I thought I was going to go to a smaller market. She gave me clothing and wardrobe and helped give me a lot of gifts in that space. The list goes on and on and on. I could say Colette Gambino, who was over at Viacom for a while. She actually was a mentor for me, just connecting me to different people in the industry to help shape me, not just as a journalist, but as a entrepreneur or a media entrepreneur. Girl, uh, uh, so many people have sown a great seed into me in a lot of different ways. So, that's a
And
loaded
I know you get
question.
pulled on. I know people ask you all the time, be my mentor, be my mentor. And people have to understand that you don't have to have a personal relationship with someone for them to be your mentor. I have a
Absolutely.
thousand mentors that I listen to.
Mm-hmm.
I have someone that I listen to daily that's in Singapore that don't even know I exist. And
Yes.
so, and they have been a mentor in my life. And so people need to understand that you don't have to have this personal relationship with someone for them to be your mentor. I hear people all the time, and what an honor to call you Lil Oprah. I know you love it when they call you that, and you haven't had a one-on-one conversation yet with Oprah, but
That's
I
right.
know that it's coming. As we wrap up today, Crystal,
Mm-hmm.
this time is important. This election season, which is coming up in a very short time, is so important. Why do you think that this election is one of the most important elections, November the 3rd, 2020? Why do
Mm.
you think that this is one of the most important elections of our time or this time?
Well, I think that for African Americans specifically, because I'm speaking, for myself as an African American woman, we are in a very unique time in our society for Black people. We've been on an equality walk for quite some time, right? Since a lot of your mentors that were active in desegregating America, right? But now it's about equity. And I think that this is a unique time for African Americans to really make a list of demands and what we want to see from our political leaders and hold them accountable. And the best way to do that is during this election. Vote for people who stand for what it is that you want to see happen within African American communities. To see the numbers of unemployment, to see the numbers of household income in the Black community, to see the number of failing schools in our communities, I think is something that we need to really hold our political leaders accountable to, not just saying what they're going to do, but for showing us a strategic plan of getting to where we want to go as a people. Right. And as a community. And so it's critical for us to get out and vote for people who are putting that in the forefront of their campaign, right? Putting that in the forefront of how they're going to stack their resources within office, meaning who are they going to appoint, right? What is the track record of those people? What is their what is it called, Meredith? The team that when you were a political appointee, presidential appointee, the staff
Oh, just
that's going to
yeah,
be.
your staff, yeah. Just your
Yeah,
appointed, your appointees, your
yeah, your
appointees, your
appointees,
appointees.
right? Who are they looking to appoint? Who do you think that they're engaging in conversations with? What do those people believe in? When you and I attended, the Congressional Black Caucus, we had a major conversation about politics are local, right? So what local officials are going to support these people that we're putting into office? And so I believe that we have a great time to have this equity conversation in America and hold people to the conversation. And so for me, so many people have lost their lives. So many people have died for us to have equity. Not just equality is cute, right? That was at first, but now I want equity, right? I'm talking about. I was reading a story about the start of Wall Street and how Wall Street was started because of the trading of slaves in that particular square. Right. And because I'm a newly tech founder, right? Now at some point I'm gonna want my company to go public, right? And so I'm thinking about the backs of the slaves that were down there being traded on Wall Street, right? And so I want to see how people are going to invest in technology in the Black community. How are they going to invest in educating our young Black kids in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math? All of that. So to answer your question, trying to put a whole lot in a short space. Listen, this is our opportunity to hold people accountable to not what Black people want, but what we deserve. Black people built America, right? We built the White House. We created some of the most used innovative technology in the world in our country. Then why are we still struggling so much? And it's not that all Black people are poor, but it's too much of a percentage of African Americans that struggle on a day to day. How are we going to open doors in corporate America to ensure that Black people get into these spaces and hold executive leadership accountable for that? Diversity is cute, inclusion is cute, but it doesn't mean anything if there's no process or agenda to help me move through the ranks once I'm in the door. So now is the time to hold our political leaders accountable for equity, not just equality.
And one last question, Crystal. What is your Black business for the week? What business are you crushing on this week?
The business that I'm crushing on, you told me to really think about this. So I will say this. I have a very good friend. I have a good friend in Baltimore. He's gonna be really excited. I'm sharing his company. It's called City of God. It's a boutique in Baltimore, but it's owned by Terrence Frazier. But one thing that I love about what Terrence is doing, he's done a unique partnership with Under Armour to capture stories within the Baltimore community, right? Of people and agents of change in the city. And so not only is he using his influence through retail to impact the community there in Baltimore, he is also using that influence to now bring corporations in to help expand the narrative of what we see and what we think of Black entrepreneurs and Black social change agents in Baltimore. So I would say City of Gods in Baltimore, Terrence Frazier, shout out to him. That is my Black business of the week.
Oh, awesome. Well, my Black business of the week is you see my shirt, my beautiful shirt, Protest and Vote. Owner
Yes,
Andre Richardson. You can find them on IG under Protest and Vote. I love this shirt. I love what it stands for. I am a big proponent of protest, but
mhm,
I'm all about voting. We have to
yes,
vote. And so protest and vote. And another business, I have to just give a shout out to my home team, Carter Seafood. Now, y'all know Black people love some good seafood. You know that being from Baltimore, Baltimore is one of those places that have the best seafood in the world. There's a seafood place called Carter Seafood in Birmingham, Alabama. Some of the best seafood in the South. So if you're in Birmingham, Alabama, check out Carter Seafood. Crystal, thank you
yes.
so much for being here today. Crystal Berger, author, journalist, media tech mogul. I am so proud of you. I've had the opportunity to be blessed to actually be on your journey with you. And so I appreciate you being here with me today. Thank you for taking your time out. And everybody that's on Town Hall Station, I cannot wait for you to watch next week's episode. We have a surprise guest for next week's episode, so you gotta tune in. I hope you enjoyed today. And the takeaway for me today, one of Meredith's moments today was enjoy the journey. Enjoy your journey. Remember, and also remember while you're on the journey. Take the small things on your journey. Don't focus on the destination, like Crystal said. Focus on the journey. There's so many good things on this journey that we're going to take with us. So just enjoy the journey. Thank you again for being with us today. See you next time.
Thank you, Meredith.